because the Passover offering is all about escaping from the trappings of paganity. And the whole idea of it's something that we always speak about. We need to speak about it more. Soon it's going to be Passover again, Bezrat Hashem, as well. The symbolism of the Passover offering and why it is so important to as the whole theme of the freedom of the Jewish people, why it's an eternal covenant. But everybody, forgets that the blood of the door on the doorpost was not a GPS for Hashem to find the Jewish houses or ways. You have arrived at your destination. It was not on the outside of the doors; it was on the inside, because it was the whole concept of that night was for the Jewish people to experience Hashem's salvation, and it was all about emunah, just like everything is a test of emunah. And it was for the people of Israel to see and to internalize, and it wasn't necessary for Hashem to be able to find their houses.
Right. Yeah, and this is the culmination of the 10 plagues. This is this final one, and this and the events that are going to follow are also preparing a people who have been locked into a slave mentality for a little over 100 and some odd years. They really didn't. They only spent 210 years, which again is important to remember, not 400, but the decades they spent in a slave mentality that is so pervasive in their thinking that God says that when you leave Egypt, don't go the way of the Philistine highway, Derek Philishtim, because you'll see war, because Hashem knew that they weren't prepared. Even though it says they left Egypt armed, they weren't even prepared to use those weapons, because there wasn't the heart and the boldness behind it yet to take up arms.
Right, that word chamushim, one explanation is armed. Another explanation of the word based on the root is that it was like only a fifth, because the vast majority of the people of Israel did not want to leave, and they perished during the plague of darkness in Hashem's compassion, so that the Egyptians wouldn't see that the Israelites are also dying. And that's such a difficult midrash to understand. Like, what does that mean that a lot of the Israelites didn't want to leave? Like, what did they have going for them exactly? It's not like they had, thick portfolios and investments and positions with the government, and like some do now. In other places, it's like when we look at the template of the Egyptian exile, what exactly could that mean? That so many Israelites were not willing to leave Egypt, and they stayed. It's mind-boggling, and yet.
It's the slave mentality. Even the ones who we know, Levi, the tribe of Levi, they were not enslaved. In fact, we know of a famous Levite that was a very rich man that lived, and he maybe had second thoughts about leaving, but he did. The cousin of Moses, who's
Korach,
Korach. Yeah, Korach.
But I think the theme of the whole idea is just, again, this kind of deep-rooted, free-floating angst and anxiety and fear of the unknown, and it becomes so infectious. It becomes so infectious, this fear of the unknown, that it would be even better to stay behind than to risk the unknown, because emunah is all about, like Jeremiah paraphrases the whole Egyptian experience. Hashem says, "I recall to you the days of your nuptials, when we were first married, when you followed me into the desert, into an unsown land." And that slave mentality continued at the sea, all the way to the sea, right? They leave on the first night of Passover, and at the end of a week, they arrive at the sea, and then Egypt is beginning to close in on them. And we have this amazing teaching about what was going on there, which is actually all kind of like foreshadowed in this verse in chapter 14, verse 13. Well, just back up a little bit. They said to Moshe, were there no graves in Egypt that you took us to die in the wilderness? What is it that you have done to us to take us out of Egypt? Is this not the statement that we made to you in Egypt, saying, let us be and we will serve Egypt? It's better that we should serve Egypt than we should die in the wilderness. And Moshe said to the people, do not fear. Stand fast and see the salvation of Hashem that he will perform for you today. For as you have seen Egypt today, you shall not see them ever again. Hashem shall make war for you, and you shall remain silent. So according to the sages, in that statement, he was addressing 4 different groups of people. Because, and this is this very famous kind of like a chilling teaching that the sages have about Israel at the sea, that they were divided into groups. One group said, let's fight them. Another group said, let's turn back and go back to Egypt. Another group said, let's cry out. And another group said, let's throw ourselves into the sea.
Yeah.
The heck with it. So to each group, Moshe answered, to the group who said, who were afraid, he said, do not fear, stand fast and see the salvation. To the group that wanted to fight them, he said, Hashem shall make war for you. To the group that cried out, he said, and you shall remain silent. But the idea being that, it's the total eve of redemption. They already saw the most mind-boggling miracles of the 10 plagues and everything that went on in Egypt. And now they're at the sea, and they're divided into these groups, and you have this sense of like division and infighting and polarization, which we have suffered from in every generation, which we still suffer from today. It's all about this kind of test of emunah and the frailty of the human condition and internalizing the reality of Hashem. And of course, we know the big difference between the men and the women. Because Hashem made this unbelievable miracle that we could talk about now for 2,000 years. The splitting of the sea has so many dimensions, so much depth. The whole concept of the song of the sea and everything that they saw, the prophecy that they saw, and what it really means, and what it signifies. It's endless, the experience of the splitting of the sea and the song of the sea. But then after that whole beautiful song in chapter 15, in verse 20, afterwards, Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, the verse says, comes out with instruments. And all the women come out with instruments and follow her lead. And they do their own dance. So the men didn't have instruments. The men didn't have any sort of backup, it was spontaneous. But the women, they were prepared. And they had brought these instruments with them because they knew Hashem would save them, because they were on such a higher level of spiritual inspiration that they were prepared. They were waiting. It's one of the most beautiful insights, that where do they have the foresight to when they're schlepping the kids and everything. They're bringing cymbals, they're bringing tambourines. They were waiting for the moment of sanctifying Hashem.
You can see Moses as they're getting to everything and the Passover bread together, and you're seeing Moses look at Miriam and go, you're putting a band together? What's all this about? So